10年早いんだよ!
Alright everyone, I know that modern fighting games use super complex, high-tech, mind-melting technology to bring you lifelike graphics, spectacular combos, and kami butt, but this video is going to take it back a bit. Released in 1994, Sega's Virtua Fighter 2 was pretty much just the first game, but better. More characters, more moves, stages, more detailed graphics, etc. And they all added up to an experience that triumphed the first game by a mile. While I could spend the rest of this video talking about things that obviously appear to us on the surface, I've decided to cover how the game looks the way it does. Using very special and pretty insane technology we'll get into later, Virtua Fighter 2 was most likely the best looking fighting game at the time, and I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that VF2 looks better than Tekken 1. Sure, the game looks really dated nowadays, but you have to keep in mind that graphics like this back in the mid-90s were, for lack of a better term, completely mental. Character detail and animation fluidity were second to none, and it seemed like Sega's AM2 development team behind the game could do nothing wrong. Virtua Fighter 2, when it came out, was a smash success, becoming one of Sega's most successful arcade games of all time, and its Sega Saturn port received universal acclaim, solidifying it as one of the best fighting games of the early to mid-90s, and maybe even of all time. Before we get into the super technical stuff, let's discuss Virtua Fighter 2's gameplay to learn about how it functions, and also learn about why people love playing it so much, especially in Japan. Like other games in the series, Virtua Fighter 2 is a one-on-one 3D fighting game. You can move around the environment on a 3D plane, and there are 3 buttons for you to use: punch, kick, and guard. You combine stick movements and these 3 buttons to perform certain moves, and it's sort of like how Tekken functions, although Virtua Fighter feels completely different to play. You win a round either by depleting the enemy's health bar, or by knocking them out of the ring. Virtua Fighter is a Japanese game after all, so I think it's pretty cool that they've incorporated some rules from sumo matches into the game. Situational awareness is paramount to victory in fighting games, but when you can literally fall off the stage on accident when you're trying to backdash, it's even more crucial to master space control in a game like Virtua Fighter. The stages themselves also vary hugely in size. They range from small platforms to arenas that are up to 82 meters or 269 feet in size. All of the 11 characters in Virtua Fighter 2 have their own unique fighting style. Akira uses Bajichuan, Wolf is a professional wrestler, Jackie uses Taekwondo, etc. So if you're a fan of a real-world martial art and you love seeing it being represented in games, chances are you'll find a character who uses it in Virtua Fighter. With only 3 buttons, Virtua Fighter 2, and by extension the other games in the series, are all really easy to play at lower levels. There are no supers, special moves, dash cancels, super jumps, or any other mechanic that may confuse newcomers. Button mashing with your favorite character can get you pretty far if you're playing with a friend for fun, and neither of you know how to play the game properly, and I think that it's pretty good. I can imagine that newcomers to the fighting game genre back in the 90s would have had a lot of fun putting $1 into the machine and going wild on the germ-ridden button layout due to how simple the game is to approach. But if you're playing at a higher level, then button mashing is a death sentence, because the pros possess an almost inhuman level of awareness for all the attack strings in the game. On the 12th of February 1995, Sega of Japan held a Virtua Fighter 2 tournament, and an hour-long VHS tape called Virtua Fighter 2 The Eternal Battle documenting the event was released in the country. Luckily for us, footage of this tournament exists today on YouTube, and we can see how the pros approached the game back then when we watch this footage. 2 major points of interest I noticed are that the pros play very defensively, their attacks are short, and they don't really commit to big powerful moves that are unsafe on block, and they also move around very quickly. By crouch dashing all over the screen, they're able to cover distance super fast for the purposes of retreating away from the enemy, but also to rapidly approach them if need be. Virtua Fighter is also a high damage fighting game, with simple strings and throws doing big damage. Rounds in Virtua Fighter only last for 30 seconds, as opposed to something like Tekken 60 seconds or Street Fighter's 99 seconds. So really, you only have a very small amount of time to make a meaningful impact. Now that we understand the type of game that Virtua Fighter 2 is when it comes to gameplay, let's discover what goes on underneath the hood to see how it all came together. To begin, Virtua Fighter 2 runs on Sega's Model 2 arcade hardware, and this is where it gets pretty crazy. According to a Japanese interview conducted for the 20th anniversary of Virtua Fighter, the game's director Yu Suzuki, being the genius or maniac that he is depending on your outlook, thought to himself, you know what would be really cool? What if I were to approach an American company who supplies their military with training materials, and what if I asked them if I can use their technology for Virtua Fighter? This may sound like I'm joking and trying to make a crazy situation up, but it actually happened. In summary, Virtua Fighter 2's killer graphics and animation were due to Yu Suzuki and the team at Sega using military-grade motion capture technology for the game's animation. Suzuki states in this interview that in the early 90s, motion capture was still in its infancy. The healthcare industry and the military were using it, sure, but not the gaming industry. The US military was also using this special motion capture technology to capture the head movements of pilots as they would be flying. Suzuki recalls, "With the collapse of the Soviet Union, America's military simulation industry was placed in the private sector, so the timing was perfect. However, our budget for procuring a chip was only around 5,000 yen, and the chip that they had was in a jet fighter simulator worth several billion yen, so settling on a price proved to be quite difficult. They said they could offer a cheaper, mass-produced chip that was only 200 million yen, so all we had to do was make up the difference. In the end, the game was a hit, and the industry gained mass-produced texture mapping chips as a result." Part 3 of a 2013 interview called The Disappearance of Yu Suzuki reveals that the chip used in the Model 2 came from military equipment from Lockheed Martin, which was formerly General Electric aerial and space textural mapping technology. It cost $2 million to use the chip. It was part of a flight simulation equipment that cost $32 million. I asked how much it would cost to just buy the chip, and they came back with $2 million. And I had to take that chip and convert it for video game use and make the technology available for the consumer at 500 yen, $50, per console, or else nobody would buy the hardware. But I did it. And because I was able to do that, we were able to put textures on the Virtua Fighter 2 characters. When asked about the difficulty of approaching such a company and convincing them to let Sega use their technology, it was very difficult. They told me that they'd make it cheap, but their concept of making it cheap was selling it for a tenth of the price, which is still $200,000. Of course, Sega's president wanted it for $50. If you spend $2 million in development to make one chip, the cost is $2 million per chip. But if you sell 2 million consoles, that's $1 per chip. So it was tough, but we were able to make it for 5,000 yen. Nobody at Sega believed me when I said I wanted to purchase this technology for our games. At the time, GE Aerial and Space, CRC, and Evans and Sutherland were the three major companies with virtual simulator technology, and the USSR had collapsed, and the government wasn't spending money like they used to on military equipment, and so these companies had to find other avenues of revenue. According to the April 1995 issue of Next Generation magazine, in an article simply titled AM2, it took the team at Sega roughly 12 months to develop the game from start to finish, and this really impresses me. Making a game using brand new military technology from scratch with such amazing and fluid animation could not have been easy. But the team at Sega absolutely succeeded in their goal. Some major improvements Sega AM2 were able to make over the first game were a better frame rate, Virtua Fighter 1 ran at 30 FPS, whereas VF2 runs at 60, 500 new moves, and 1,200 motion patterns, as opposed to the first game's 700 patterns. Look, I know that was a lot, but it's absolutely crazy to me how Yu Suzuki, and by extension Sega, were able to use such sophisticated technology for an arcade game. I mentioned modern fighting games' graphical capabilities during the beginning of this video, but man, I still really think that the lengths they went to for this game triumphs the modern ones. Overall, Virtua Fighter 2 plays great, has unique and fluid game mechanics, and it runs on a combination of military technology, black magic, and a Japanese work ethic. If you like old school fighting games like me, you can play Virtua Fighter 2 on numerous emulators, and if you've still got an Xbox 360 or a PS3 hooked up, you can grab the game on those consoles' digital marketplaces to play it in high definition with modern controllers. Thank you for watching, I hope you had fun and also learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.